Hey, fifth grade, it's Miss Rosh. I hope all of you did your lesson with Miss Birchfield last week and enjoyed it. For today's video, we're going to go over the answer key to the questions that you received with Miss Birchfield, and then we are going to read and answer questions on a different article called Into the Rapids. So let's go ahead and begin. Okay, guys, so I have the answer key for the mysterious dark day pulled up. We're going to go over these answers real quickly. For part A, you should have chosen A and D. For question 2, part B, the answers were B and F. For number 3, you should have chosen B. And for number 4, you should have chosen B. And of course, for number 5, your answers will vary. So first I want to make sure that we all know how to access the material on our own, even outside of this video. So you're going to go to commonlit.org, and then you're going to create a student account. You can find this button in the top right-hand corner of the screen. Then you're going to click I'm a student. You enter the class code LVEE9G right here. And then once you do that, this screen will come up. You're going to type in your first and last name, create a password, then you click Set Up Account, and then you'll have access to all of the materials that Hamlin County posts on a weekly basis. So for example, for this week, our story is Into the Rapids by Bradford H. Robbie. And this is what it will look like on your phone or your computer screen, whichever you choose to use. And I want to point out some features that it has. You can make the font size bigger, making it easier to read, and it also has a read aloud option. So if you want to reread any passages or you need extra help, then you have that option. These little microphones will pop up. Simply click on the one next to the part where you want to read.
1 minute. Wyatt was perched on the edge of the raft,
And
like everyone else.
You can pause it. You can hide read aloud. This is a great option to better enforce our reading skills and our comprehension and make sure that we're reading it correctly. So I'm going to read you this article or the story, and then we're going to be looking at some questions that you have to answer after you read the passage. So I'm going to make the font a little smaller. You will have 5 questions to answer, and a great strategy to, when you're taking a test or a quiz or just answering questions on a passage, you might want to read what your questions are before you start reading the passage so you know what to look for. So my first question says, Part A, which sentence describes the main theme of the story? So I know as I read, I'm going to have to look for a theme. And if you'll remember, something that we've talked about this year is that a theme is the message or lesson or moral of a story that the author is wanting us to learn. So we're going to have to decide as we read what we think the author is trying to tell us. What is the message or a lesson learned from this story? So part B says, which detail from the text best supports the answer to part A? And then I have 4 direct quotes that have been pulled from this section of reading. So for this type of question, I know that it has to support or prove the answer that I chose from question 1. So remember, we need to look for key details or phrases that directly support whichever answer we choose. Question 3, what does the narrator mean when they say that the canyon walls rose straight up like skyscrapers? In paragraph 9, and that deals with our standard about determining the meaning of words and phrases as they are used in a text. And in this case, we're dealing with figurative language, particularly a simile. So I need to be able to look in my passage and determine, based off of my context clues, what does this really mean? How do I know that? What details from my passage are going to prove this? So for Which of the following describes how Wyatt responds when he falls into the water? And this is simply a matter of describing how a plot unfolds as well as how characters respond to the plot and as it changes. So I know that I'm going to have to pay attention to the events that occur and in what order they occur. And number 5, how do paragraphs 11 through 13 contribute to the story? 1 minute, Wyatt was perched on the edge of the raft like everyone else. The next, he was falling overboard, right into the monstrous rapids. They were on the Arkansas River, navigating a 10-mile stretch of whitewater that passed through one of Colorado's deepest canyons. There were 7 people on the raft, 6 paddlers and Brody, their guide. Brody had cautioned them that some of the rapids would be intense. "Just follow my commands and we'll do fine," he yelled over the thundering river. Wyatt had become accustomed to Brody's instructions of forward 1 stroke and forward 2, but now Brody was telling them to paddle backward. Just seconds earlier, they had freed another raft that was hung up on a rock by intentionally slamming into the stalled raft, but the momentum had caused their own raft to enter some tricky rapids too quickly. So here I'm having a problem emerge. "All back, everyone, hard," Brody shouted. "We do not want to hit this." But it was too late. The raft rammed into the canyon wall. As they bounced back, one end of the raft was sucked downward. Suddenly, water was pouring in everywhere. The paddlers struggled to keep their balance, but as the boat popped back up, Wyatt was thrown backward into the water. His body took off like a shot. He was overwhelmed by the river's frightful power. The water tossed him around, pummeling him with waves, pulling him under, thrusting him up. He caught breaths whenever he could. He looked over his shoulder, expecting to see Brody about to toss him the lifeline, but he'd already moved 50 yards ahead of the raft. "I can't believe this is happening," Wyatt thought. On either side of him, the canyon's walls rose straight up like skyscrapers, offering nothing to hold on to. He tried to remember the safety talk he had half listened to. "If you fall out, we'll either pull you back in or I'll throw you a lifeline," Brody had told them. Wyatt's brother Johnny had leaned toward him, whispering, "Wouldn't it be awesome to fall in?" "Like a flume ride," Wyatt had joked, grinning. Dad had shushed them, making it clear they should be listening to the guide. "If you do fall in," Brody had continued, "don't stand up. Float on your back, feet facing downriver and held high so your legs can cushion any rocks you might run into." Wyatt rolled onto his back now, pointing his feet downstream, and lost his grip on the paddle that was still in his hand. He watched as the paddle quickly disappeared into the white water. He knew he had to let go of the idea that someone was going to swoop down and save him. "I have to get out of this," he realized. He thought of his middle school basketball tournament, how he had kept calm and blocked out the crowd while shooting foul shots. "Don't panic," he told himself. The river quieted momentarily, and Wyatt was able to catch his breath. Around the bend, he saw a stretch of riverbank with some tumble-down rocks that might provide a handhold. Then he saw something even more promising. The raft they'd freed earlier was pulled up alongside the riverbank. Its crew spotted Wyatt and started waving frantically. "Swim!" they shouted. "Swim to us!" His hopes ignited. Wyatt turned onto his stomach and swam. He gave it everything he had. "You can make it!" they yelled. He was getting closer, but the relentless current was pushing him downstream away from the raft. Wyatt adjusted his angle by aiming higher upriver and swam even harder, using every last ounce of energy. Finally, he was just a yard away. Knowing this was his only chance, he took 2 strokes and lunged for the raft. Immediately, he felt strong hands grabbing hold of his life vest and pulling him from the river. As he collapsed in a shaking heap, someone asked him if he was okay, but Wyatt was too winded to speak. A moment later, his team's raft pulled up next to them. After Wyatt had recovered, Dad, Brody, and the other guide helped him climb into their raft. "You did a great job getting out of a dangerous situation," Brody told him. "You really kept your head." Wyatt grinned self-consciously, and then Brody said, "Okay, team, we've got 1 more set of rapids today, and then we're home free." Wyatt looked at him in disbelief. "Don't worry, they're small," Brody said reassuringly, "because the river's our only ticket home." Wyatt nodded. As Brody handed him an extra paddle, he had a new respect for the river's power. But now that same power was going to carry him back safely. Brody pushed them off, Forward paddle, everyone, he called, and they started for home. Okay, so I know my question 1 is dealing with theme, and that was a very exciting story. But remember, when I'm looking for theme, the lesson learned, I need to be looking for something the character has learned or that the reader has learned. And if I look closely, I think that this takes place at the end of my story. It says he had a new respect for the river's power, but now the same power is going to carry him back safely. So ask yourself, what did he learn? And that is found directly here. Okay, so you're going to look at your 4 options and you're going to pick the one that best supports what you think the message of the story is. So that you have to take into account key details from your passage, what you paid attention to, and of course, key information that the character has learned. For part 2, I want you to pick the detail that best supports the answer that you chose. So remember, look for key words that directly support the answer you chose. Ms. Birchfield talked to you about that in the last lesson, so hopefully we can build off of that and continue doing well with this standard. All right, so what does the narrator mean when they say that the canyon walls rose straight up like skyscrapers in paragraph 9? Now, for questions like these, determining meanings of words and phrases, I need to go back in my text. Even if I think that I'm 100% sure that I know what my answer is, I need to go back and double check. I need to find that again, and I need to look for context clues. I can't believe this is happening, Wyatt thought. On either side of him, the canyon walls rose straight up like skyscrapers, offering nothing to hold on to. So if I were you, if I didn't know what a skyscraper was, I would focus on the offering nothing to hold on to, okay? So I know that he cannot keep from going down the river because the walls don't offer anything to hold on to. So think about, what does that mean about the walls? And also, in case you didn't know, a skyscraper is a very tall building, often in large cities, okay? So number 4, which the following describes how Wyatt responds when he falls into the water. That is simply a matter of going back in my text and finding where he fell in the water and directly what happens after, okay? A lot of us, when we go back and read a text, we might latch onto a detail that occurs after the actual next thing that happens. So what I want to do is I want to go back and I want to find where he falls into the water, and then I want you to pick the answer that happens directly after that. For number 5, how do paragraphs 11 through 13 contribute to the story? So here is paragraphs 11 through 13, and it's a little conversation between Wyatt's brother and his dad. So it's almost a bit of foreshadowing, which, remember, foreshadowing is textual evidence that offers us insight into what might happen next. So go ahead and do your best to answer those questions. Have out a sheet of notebook paper and go ahead and do this yourself. So the last thing that you're going to have to do is you're going to add on to a little essay prompt that goes along with the story that we're doing every week. So you did one last week and you're going to do a different one this week. So my prompt is, what happens the rest of the trip home? Continue Wyatt and Brody's adventure. Make sure to keep the same tone as the story. Now remember, a tone is the mood or feeling that the passage conveys or makes us feel. So make sure you're keeping that same tone. Ask yourself, was this passage exciting? Was it nerve-wracking? Was it sad? Was it scary? What type of tone was in this writing? And of course, you need to make sure you use the same characters, same setting, and add to the current plot. Make it match with what's happened before. Use the same characters. Make sure they have the same personality. Use dialogue. And of course, have fun with this.